Hi friends, so short video about the EU's Firearms directive and its implementation in Sweden, and it's called the last government, the socialists, they implemented this, and it's been presented this week, and it's called the EU Firearms Directive, implementation of the year of 2017's change directive on a minimum level. And that is the text below here as well. So I'm going to remove that text so you don't have to look at it. There you go. So let's talk about what this is and how it came to pass. So on the 14th of November this was presented, which was this Monday, this week. So it's the 17th when I'm recording this. Yeah. And how did the Firearms Directive in and of itself come to pass? Well, it's a long story, and Sweden is in the middle of it. First, we saw this was back in 2013. The moderate party, basically the political parties in power to this year, since September this year. Back in 2013, they were in power as well, and was the current government back in 2013. And they implemented a firearms investigation to change the firearms law in Sweden, and they appointed a woman called Doris Högner Rydheim, a police chief. I think she was the principal of the police academy or something back then, to handle this. She was basically against all civilian firearms ownership. She became famous for wanting to ban several shooting sports like IPSC, the traditional Swedish submachine gun shooting, etc. And this got a lot of criticisms. I still have my emails from back then by Morgan Johansson, who was Minister of Interior, something like that, I don't remember, in the last government, where he complained a lot about this. After this, he basically, when he came into power, he called legal gun owners basically indirectly terrorists, and treated us like terrorists for owning legal firearms. We are the most law-abiding group of people in any country. Fun note, we commit less crime, the legal gun owners in Sweden, than the police officers themselves. So there's that. So, well, put the police officers in jail instead. It's ridiculous, right? It's only about power, grabbing more power. Anyway, back to the story. This didn't even get put forth towards Parliament back in 2014, I guess that was. So it was put in the trash heap of history, I thought. But in the background, a commissioner in the European Union called Cecilia Malmström from the Liberal Party. Yeah, basically, in the background, Cecilia Malmström from the Liberal Party made an amendment to the European Union Firearms Directive back in 2014, 2015. And she was the commissioner with responsibility for trade. And the European Union is supposedly a trade alliance from the start. So yeah, big responsibility, and you can fit anything into trade, so apparently. So the European Firearms Directive is originally about trade of firearms between European Union countries. But it's expanded quite a lot, right? So what happened in 2015? In November, I believe it was in 2015, in France, the Bataclan massacre happened. The usual suspects committed terrorism, and France was in a crisis. Just a few days, I think it was like 4 or 5 days after the Bataclan massacre, Cecilia Malmström put forward the suggestion for a new firearms directive and said it is essential to fight against terrorism. Yeah. Nothing in the European Firearms Directive back then, now, or in that horrible suggestion she put forward would have affected terrorism. They don't buy their guns legally from a legal gun shop, right? Anyone could understand that. They smuggled them and did a shitload of crimes before they started murdering people. So yeah, that was a lie, but France has a lot of pull in the European Union. They're one of the larger countries. I guess Germany is bigger, or back then at least Great Britain. So they put all their political weight behind this to please the local voters, basically in France. We are doing something, right? Never let a good tragedy go to waste. And so this was going to happen. But fortunately, a bunch of politicians managed to whittle it down and put in a bunch of exceptions and shit. In 2017, when it was voted through, it was bad, really bad, but it was basically up to the individual countries to tell their citizens exactly how bad. And it broke a bunch of EU rules by making this. They broke against they went against the subsidiarity principle, which means that individual countries get to decide their own shit when it's stuff that should be regulated locally. They didn't care about that. The Swedish government basically had a vote and said that this breaks against the subsidiarity principle. This should not happen at all. But no one gave a shit, because when we sent police officers down to the European Union to talk about this and gave them a mandate to basically shut it down, they did the opposite. The Swedish police lied and cheated the government and parliament, and did the opposite. Wanted more regulations, and when they came back to Sweden, they lied about it. This was a tiny little scandal. I think it was the Swedish Democrats who demanded something be done about this. I think this is one of the reasons, one of the biggest culprits in the Swedish police, a guy named Peter, basically got told to resign. He became politically uncomfortable. Anyway, so that's the backstory on the European Union Firearms Directive. And since then, the socialists who came into power after this, and one of the reasons the right lost is because of this bullshit. So the socialists came into power, and they don't really want to do anything. They don't have any real policies. They just want to be in power. So they listened to the police, and they became the gun banners after being against this shit. Because before that election, they wanted to please their constituents, and after they didn't give a shit. They just wanted to stay in power, and power wants more power, and regulating firearms is getting more power to the politicians, and they just want more power. And yeah, boot on your face for eternity, etc. So yeah, anyway, they tried several times, I think 3 times, 4 times. I think this is the 4th time they tried to implement the Firearms Directive, and this is the most lenient one so far. Still, they made some bullshit up. So the main part they're going to try to regulate are firearms magazines. So it's not that bad. Basically the same as suppressors. If you have a firearm, you can own whatever magazine for it. No size regulations. If you have a hunting firearm, you can get a 33 round happy stick for your Ruger PC carbine. No big deal. Still, it is an over-implementation. So the best way to regulate this would have been, if you are a firearms owner, you are automatically allowed to have whatever magazine. That would be the simple part. Now it's regulated by firearms. If you have firearm X, then you can have magazine for firearm X. But if you have magazine for firearm Y, you're not allowed to have it. That's a serious crime. Why is that a problem? Because magazines can fit different firearms. You can have a Glock 18, that's a machine gun. You can have a PC carbine, that's a hunting rifle. You can have an AR-15 that can take Glock magazines. You can have a Glock that take Glock magazines. An AR-15 mag can fit different calibers and have different capacity with different calibers, and it can fit whatever. It can fit bolt actions, semi-autos, M16s, machine guns, whatever. And magazines, you can 3D print them, you can carve them out of wood, you can do whatever. They're basically regulating a box, a spring, and that's it. And yeah, it's bullshit. So it's what we call in Sweden a rubber band law. They can put you in jail for whatever. Someone can say, well, this magazine doesn't fit your gun, it can fit this gun, it's illegal, blah blah blah, even if it actually fits your gun. Who knows what shit they'll make up? You don't know. And it will only you can always be sure that the Swedish police will take the most draconian interpretation of everything. So yeah, this is bullshit, and it introduces a lot of issues that is totally unnecessary, even if it could have been worse. So they did not follow, even if it's in the name of the investigation, they didn't follow through on the minimum implementation of this. And they basically said, well, we didn't have enough time, and oh, we don't like how that would look in Swedish law, and a bunch of shit like that if they would have gone this way. So instead they made this stupid, complicated thing. To be sure, both suppressors and magazines should not be regulated at all. But unfortunately, the European Union Firearms Directive makes it so we're going to have some regulation on magazines, and the most minimum implementation is the one that I said. And it's the one Erik Lakoma is suggested back in 2020, which means that if you own a firearm that you're allowed to shoot with, it's not like a decoration deactivated one or something, then you can have whatever magazine you want for it. That is the minimum implementation, and that is possible to do with exceptions in the European Union Firearms Directive. They didn't do this, and it's not even hard to do. He already wrote articles in law newspapers about this, how that's implemented. So another thing, you guys do fritt gevär or free rifle or do IPSC shooting, all the scary firearms that goes into category A, like an MP5, an AR-15, or whatever. The main difference is going to be that you're going to have to be part of a shooting club for a year before you can own one. That's the biggest difference. They're going to put into law requirements on being able to handle it and proficiency and stuff like that as well. But that's you're already going to have that, basically. The police won't allow you to get a license unless your shooting club has that shit. So it shouldn't affect us that much. Only if you're a new member, you get to wait a little bit longer, a year. That's unfortunate, but unfortunately that's not negotiable with the European Union Firearms Directive, as far as I can tell. Gun brokers will be regulated. And what is a gun broker? No one knows what a gun broker is. It's not going to affect anyone because they made up a term that doesn't mean anything and want to regulate it. These people who make up this shit are idiots. They know nothing about firearms. They just want to have more regulation. So they actually made up regulation for shit that does not exist. Another thing I do not like is that the communication between police departments are going to increase. That could be a good thing, but not when it is like, for example, if the Swedish police denies you a license for an AR-15 for bullshit reasons, they're going to have to send that denial to all the other police organizations in the European Union for some fucking reason. Yeah. And the suspicion that I've heard about why they fucked up the minimum implementation of magazines is that they probably had another suggestion ready, and then the socialists lost the election in September, so they had to scramble to rewrite it to something they think might pass. So they're trying to pass whatever they can. And yeah, we'll see what happens. It's not now. We're gonna have all the organizations that have an interest in this, like the police and the shooting organizations and whatnot, gonna have their say up until the 15th of December. And you and me can write in as well. If you want to do that, just Google how to do that and search for the name of. I'll put the link to the instructions in the description. I'll do that if you want to do it, and if you do, be super polite about it, right? And Google how to write it, read a few of these answers before sending in one. And if you only have a few things you want to talk about, like the magazine question, then just answer that. Yeah, gun owners in Sweden is about 12% of the voting cattle. People who are allowed to vote in Sweden. We're 12% of them, gun owners in Sweden. We should have a little bit to say. Our opinions should count. So yeah, I hope they listen to us. And what I've heard from Sten Berghed and the Moderate Party is that if there's some bullshit in this, they're gonna try to fix it. We'll see if that happens. I believe it when I see it. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Unfortunately, this is bullshit regulation. There's some good things. They're not gonna fuck with us if we wanna import magazines, buy and sell magazines. There's basically nothing impacting us if we already own a gun. It's just there's a lot of risk involved now going forward with the police fucking us, and they will try. Okay, now I'm starting to ramble. Time to shut this off. Okay, I'll tell you more as I get the news. See ya.